But I can't let you get out of here without talking about some Michael Penix.
I think it's a good pick. Now, do I think it's a nice pick?
Welcome into the NFL on Fox podcast. I'm your host, Dave Hellman. We are continuing to bask in the afterglow of the 2024 NFL Draft. Obviously, putting some days between us and the festivities themselves, but so much to get into. Really excited to talk to our guest today, who was actually on hand in Detroit. NFL Network's Cynthia Frelund stops by the show, not just to talk about the scene, the vibes in Detroit, but also some of the best values from this year's draft class, the way that we should analyze some of these NFL teams' decision-making process during the draft. You're going to want to stay tuned for that. You're going to want to stay tuned for plenty more content as we recap the draft, as we look forward to the spring off-season programs, OTAs, and minicamp firing up before you know it. Make sure you're subscribed on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Notice the schedule release. I know it's coming soon. The NFL hasn't put a date on it. I thought that was really funny during the draft coverage. They were like, get ready for the schedule release show. It's going to be amazing. No date. Not sure when it's happening, but it will be happening soon. I guarantee you we'll have that for you. In addition to plenty more, make sure you're subscribed. Socials at NFL on Fox Pod. Go find us on Twitter, on Instagram. Make sure you download the Fox Sports app for even more coverage than that. I personally, shameless plug, I put out a new power rankings post-draft, give you an idea of how I think the league shakes out now that everyone's put their draft class together. Of course, there are going to be changes, and let's start with that at the top of the show before we get to Cynthia. We're already seeing teams start to make moves post-draft. You see this every year. You're going to focus all of your energy on your draft class, on the draft process, focusing on those 7 to 10 guys that you're going to bring in as rookies. The minute it's over with, though, NFL teams get to work on bringing in veterans. The compensatory pick period officially ended on Monday, so now teams can sign veterans without affecting the draft picks that they'll be awarded in the spring. So, yeah, you're going to see some movement, and sure enough, nobody wasted any time. Couple big-time free agent additions I want to make sure you're aware of. Philadelphia Eagles agreed to a small incentive-inspired contract with Mekhi Becton, the former first-round offensive tackle for the New York Jets. Becton, mountain of a man. Injuries really derailed his career in New York over the years. What better landing spot than the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland, credited with so much from the development of Jason Kelce to Jordan Mailata, the success of their big left tackle. If he's going to revamp his career, Philly seems like the place to do it. So that is a natural place for him to sign on as the third tackle in Philly. Of course, the biggest headliner comes on Monday, and that's the reunion. The Dallas Cowboys bringing back Ezekiel Elliott. Their star running back was gone in New England for just 1 year. They cut him for cap purposes. Remember, it was that big $90 million contract. Couldn't pay that, but they're more than happy to pay him to a $3 million contract, $2 million of it guaranteed. Zeke is back in Dallas. I believe he's going to wear 21. So if you're a Cowboy fan, you get some juice out of that jersey a little bit longer. I think it's important to be honest about what this probably is. Cowboy fans, I think the ship sailed on Zeke being a 11, 12, 1,300 yard rusher like we got used to from 2016 to 2020. I do still think Zeke can be a useful part of a committee. Remember, the Cowboys did not draft a running back over the weekend, so this was probably their biggest need. I don't think Zeke fills it all on his own. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys do some more to kind of zhuzh up their running back depth chart. Maybe they'll add a guy later in the summer. Maybe they'll wait for training camp cuts. But Zeke provided a very useful 640 yards for New England, and that was on a terrible offense with a terrible quarterback position. So in Dallas, back with Dak Prescott, back with some of the talent around there, I think Zeke can be your short yardage, your goal line back. Not going to be surprised if they give him the ball down near the goal line, let Zeke score 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. I don't think this is going to change the math for the Dallas offense, but I do think it can work as part of a committee. One more bit of Cowboy free agent related news. Former Cowboy receiver, He was the cap casualty this year. Their former wide receiver number 3 gets cut in March, and now he has officially landed with the Las Vegas Raiders on a $3 million contract. Nice little piece of depth. Remember, the Raiders cut Hunter Renfrow, so they need more bodies, more depth behind Devontae Adams. See how Michael Gallup responds. It's been a rough couple years since he tore his ACL, but plenty of opportunity there behind Adams. One other small note. This is also the type of thing NFL teams love to do after the draft. The Jacksonville Jaguars cut veteran receiver Zay Jones, and that comes, 4 days after they draft LSU rookie Brian Thomas Jr. at receiver. So, yeah, the draft is done. Teams are evaluating their depth charts and saying, where do we need help? Where do we no longer need these guys? I have a feeling we're going to be seeing this happen over the course of the next month. And then, obviously, everything shuffles once you get to training camp. We will have you up to date on everything that happens there, all of the roster shuffling, all of the churning, try to get the best combination possible as we get ready for training camp. Keep you updated on all of that. But until then, a wonderful interview with NFL Network's Cynthia Freeland, looking back at the value at some of the best moments of the draft that was. All right, as promised, really, really excited to be joined now by NFL Network's own analytics expert, data scientist, Cynthia Freeland. Cynthia, how's it going? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's always funny when I hear people call me an analytics expert. It's only because it's really hard to say analytics analyst. So
yes.
That's why I got like the title bump, because analytics analyst is a real tongue twister and can lead you down a very, very dark path.
between analyst and then, different people pronounce it data versus data. Like it's tricky. So I appreciate you bearing with me.
It's definitely tricky. And it's definitely like, you'd be surprised how many people call me Symphony. Who knew? Not even a name.
That's a new one for me. All right. Well, if I got your name right, then I might at least start.
Perfect. You're doing great.
Yeah, I'm doing awesome. Okay. I wanted to start with this. We talked about this before the draft. I remember you are a Michigander. You are a Michigan native. I think it's no secret right now at this point that you've got love for the Detroit Lions, and you were in Detroit for the draft. So I want to start there because you're the first person I've talked to that was actually at the draft. And it just looked like the vibes were off the charts. What was it actually like over the weekend?
I mean, I watched back a little bit of the coverage and it was even better in person. My state showed up and showed out. I'm so proud of everyone that was there. They were tailgating on Thursday starting at 8 a.m., playing bags in the parking lot. Well, they could have even started earlier, but I saw them at 8 a.m. So ridiculous amount of joy, just being very happy. It was really great to see in a city that really got decimated in 2008. I'm the daughter of an automotive worker. So seeing this city that meant so much to my family forever, like absolutely shine, was really, really cool. And then being on stage, I mean, I got a chance, there's a career moment. I got a chance to interview Barry Sanders in front of 300,000 people. I will say somehow it got a little, like a big thing of dust, like flew up in my eyes right when it ended, right when I got a chance to tell him that he was the reason that not only was I a Lions fan, but also a football fan. It got real dusty in there after that. But, and I was like, and I'm pretty sure like 75% of this audience could say the same thing. And they all went crazy. And it was cool. That was really special. It meant that was such a career moment. I get a little choked up thinking about it, especially with the family connections and what that means to that city.
It's so great when like you can tell you're having a moment that's going to matter, like in the moment. You know what I mean?
I got a tattoo.
No, what? I didn't know that.
Well, yeah. So I don't know. I was really feeling it apparently, but I got the state of Michigan tattooed on my ankle. Don't worry about it. My mom, she found out on television. So cool. We're all good here. But yeah, state of Michigan now, outline of Michigan on my ankle. I was really feeling it.
That's look, you're talking to a guy that has an LSU tattoo, so I understand. I am curious and I don't say this to take shots, but I mean, let's just be honest. The city of Detroit has been thought of as like a football black hole for so long. And like, I know how the playoffs ended, but even still, the moment that Detroit is having right now, like it feels like it has to exceed the wildest dreams that like, this is a football hotspot. Detroit's getting a chance to show just how much it has been craving good football. And I don't know, man. It's really cool to see all of that waiting pay off.
I mean, all of my years of waiting finally paying off. No, the Jared Goff chants were amazing. The fact that, those guys stood on the stage ahead of time, it was like a litany of Lions legends, current and past, and it was really, really special. It was also cool. I mean, look, I'm not going to take a shot at the Pistons, but I'm going to take a shot at the Pistons. The fact that the Pistons and the Lions won the same number of games in an entire season, that just goes to show you that. And you don't really hear about that as much as you heard about like this, like love for the Lions. I was there in 2004 when the Pistons won. It was incredible. I mean, they obviously won in Los Angeles, but whatever. I went to a playoff game. It was really special. But now it's the Lions' time. It's the Lions' turn. And it's really cool to see how this team has come together. And the legend, I mean, being able to see Megatron on stage with Barry Sanders and Jared Goff and Amon-Ra and Eminem, like it was wild.
One last thing before we actually talk draft. I have to admit, I think I've said this to you before, like I'm reluctant to change. I get set in my ways. I'll admit it. When they started this whole thing about moving the draft around the country, I didn't really see the reason for it. I was like, what, why is the draft really that big of a deal? My bad, everybody, because I really think this is one of the coolest things that the NFL does. I can't wait to see how Green Bay does it. I love getting a chance to see all of these football cities really show out.
Can I lobby for the Buffalo Bills to get it once their stadium's done?
Yes.
Because Buffalo would be an insane place to have a draft. That would be so much fun. I mean, obviously there's ties from Michigan to Buffalo. Ralph Wilson lived in Michigan, et cetera, et cetera. But you saw a lot of Bills fans there as well, and they're just like ready for it. Also, the things you don't really see on TV are all the family events that you can do. Like you can go play skee ball and have yourself, announced as though you're one of the draft picks. And, there was a cool Lions experience, but there was also a cool other NFL teams experiences as well. So there was actually kind of a lot to do, which I think we don't really necessarily show on TV as well, but there was just a ton to do. There was a really good family atmosphere as well.
Unprecedented success. Good job on the league office for having the vision here. All right, let's actually talk about these draft picks, these draft classes. And I'm going to struggle to articulate this because I think it's a hard thing to quantify, but getting ready to talk to you, I was looking back at your Twitter feed and obviously researching the way people feel about these classes. And you come back to the idea of value. This team X got great value with this guy. And I'm curious, as somebody who reads up on the math of this, who is well informed on this, like, how do you quantify that? And more importantly, how do NFL front offices quantify that? Like, is it strictly based around their draft boards? Is there more to it? I'm just wondering if you can give me a better idea of what constitutes good value other than, hey, I've heard that guy's name before.
So a couple of things. The first thing is as with any job, what you measure matters. So if you're looking for, just use a quarterback because it's the easiest one, traits X, Y, and Z, and you have a resume that shows that they're capable or even exceptional at doing X, Y, and Z, it makes things easier. Well, these teams, you have to remember, it's not just the first round. It is all of the rounds. And in fact, the teams that do really well, they get Friday and early Saturday really, really right. And what does that mean? That means they look at these players that appear average on one particular set of college film, and then they take them on their team with their traits, what they're asking that person to do at the next level, and they become more than average or better than average based on the system, the fit, the coaching, and how that the team actually wants to operate. Like just a quick example, if you have like the Eagles, they sub out a lot of their defensive front players. So you don't need a guy that plays 3 downs. You need this guy that plays this specific thing against this thing, and this is what we want him to do here. Those pieces have to be concrete in someone's mind. And then when you're watching the film and doing your homework on each one of these players, the better the fit, the stronger the chances that this is a successful pick as opposed to a not successful pick. And there's so much research that shows that oftentimes it's actually the number of picks you have and how often you pick, right? As opposed to getting it right with specific players. Now, take the first round out of that because you have to get your quarterback right. But let's say you don't have to have a quarterback. It shows, and you can ask Daryl Morey. He can show you all this as well. But more picks tend to be better than than one. But again, it's finding those pieces that in your system are above average as opposed to just being average in someone else's system.
Is there any way, and I feel like the answer is going to be no, because I know all 32 of these front offices just do it slightly different or maybe completely different depending. But I'm curious, I think a great reference point to what you just said is your team, the Detroit Lions, who I love what they did. I absolutely love it. Like trading up for Terrion Arnold, you get arguably the best cornerback in the draft at 24 overall. You go get, quote unquote, your guy or the guy. But at the same time, you did trade away a top 75 pick to make that happen. And I'm curious, yeah, you'll hear analysts say more bites at the apple is always better. How do you kind of weigh when it's time to make a decision like that, where if we can get this guy, it might be worth giving up the resource?
So you can look at the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, and even though people are like, well, it's not exactly right, it's pretty right. If you go back through historical trades and where people end up netting out, I mean, you can Google it. There's a point value that's assigned to every pick in the draft. So when you get down in the 20s, what you're sacrificing to move, 4 spots in the 20s is really not that big of a deal compared to if you're moving 4 spots at the top of the draft. That's like giving away the entire farm. So it's really a matter of like where you're moving and how you're kind of navigating in order to get there. I really love the strategy that the Lions did, or any team does, and when they double down on the same position. So the Lions picked a defensive back, obviously Terrion Arnold, corner, really, really great. He was number 1 on many people's corner draft list. And then they also picked another defensive back with their second selection. So sometimes, that's how you create more too. The Buffalo Bills successfully did this the year they picked Kaiir Elam. I think he was picked like 23rd or 24th. And then they had Christian Benford in the 6th round, and Christian Benford has really worked out. So oftentimes it's a matter of sometimes duplicating the same position actually ends up becoming really, really good for you. Or you can always rotate. And, if you're focusing on the things that you're trying to actually execute, be passing, stopping the pass, those are big ones in the modern game, then you're probably going to be better off doing that than you are if you're just going to say, okay, we're doing only defensive back, we're trading up for Terrion Arnold, then we're not adding more to help him out with this, we're expecting a ton of him. No, let's not do that. We've seen this before. There was a very high draft pick. We're not going to remember him. He's no longer in Detroit. Not going to play that game again.
Yeah. I won't bring it up, but that's not that long ago.
Nope. He's still in the league down in Atlanta.
He sure is. I believe the Houston Texans, if I remember correctly.
Oh, Texans. I thought he was Atlanta still.
I think he's off to Houston now. He was in Atlanta for sure. I'm curious, not to put you on the spot, but it made me, our old pal Howie Roseman, I thought had a really interesting soundbite after the draft. And again, you mentioned, the first round's a little bit different when you talk about the value of these picks, but Howie Roseman over the weekend was talking about if you're going to be a day 3 draft pick, you got to do something rare. You've got to be something very unique. I wonder, especially with your background, like when you're watching teams make those smaller picks, do you ever are you ever trying to figure out what their strategy is? Like, oh, this is a team that really values relative athletic score. This is a team that's looking for freaky traits. This is a team that could potentially be trying to fill need. Like I'm so interested by trying to figure out what everybody's philosophy is based on what they're doing.
Totally. I mean, some people it's easier. Let's go back to the Lions. They drafted in the late rounds a guard out of Boston College, Christian Mahogany. That's smart because they lost one of the best guards in the league. They couldn't pay him. They could only pay one, right? And they had some other people that they paid. So he is now a Los Angeles Ram. So that type of thing makes sense. Now there's other teams who I'm very interested to see why the Jets picked a ton of running backs, 3. Are they now going to use like more of a halfback, like fullback situation? Like, what are we doing here? I'm very curious to see, especially when you have a really great elite defense, but it's not super deep. They could have used some more rotational players on their defense because you get some injuries, which see the Bills last season. You can really be stressed out. It can be very difficult, but 3 running backs, that's interesting. And then you have I'll say one that I did love. I love the Patriots strategy drafting Joe Milton, because he's just got a big arm. And even if he just makes the practice squad, he could approximate Josh Allen really well. Like if he's running scout team, and I understand that's not very sexy or fun, but as he's kind of getting, cutting his teeth in the NFL or even on the scout team, that could be useful to them too. So it is something exceptional or useful. But Jets, I wonder what the strategy is. I want to ask Joe Douglas, be like, Joe, why so many running backs, bro? What's going on here?
Yeah, the Jets were like, we're just replacing our running backs room all at once. Like we have Breece, but we're just doing it all in one draft, I guess.
I think they have like 7 right now. And it's not like, right before training camp where you kind of add the guys to be like, hey, let's take a roll of it. Like they drafted 3. Like
as someone who gets paid to cover the Dallas Cowboys, I wouldn't have minded if they had let one of those guys fall.
Oh, no way. I thought that the Cowboys did really well. They didn't have a lot of picks. They have, I thought that I was really proud of the Cowboys for not reaching for anyone. Zeke will be great enough. Like, I don't think better to deal with the O line and then be able to pay CD and like keep some people happy. Like Michael's still there. Last I checked, your defense has some good people. Like you're great. Like good job. Good on you. A+. Very happy that they didn't overdo it with, the Jets stole all the extra running backs, so they didn't just reach for something weird.
Well, so let me ask you that, because like I said, I peeped your Twitter timeline, so I have an idea, but I know you loved the Tyler Guyton pick to Dallas. And I have such a crush on what the Steelers did to their offensive line as well. Other than that, did anybody just really make you happy with the value that they got? And I mean, outside of the first round, really, like, did you really just love anything else that you saw in the second 2 days?
The Dolphins had a killer day 3. Their day 3 was really, really good. Like, it's so interesting because they're in that, like the AFC East is weird this year. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is coming back. Okay. But are the Bills had a weird draft, like to move back one spot, and I just don't get it. So it remains to be seen. When you've got Josh Allen, you're always going to be in it, but confusing, right? The Patriots are clearly, they're building for the future. We'll see Jacoby Brissett for at least how long? I don't know, but some amount of time. And but the East is interesting. I think the Dolphins, with their day 3 picks, could have maybe made it so that the East is a lot closer to only being theirs.
The Dolphins, as soon as I saw that they were trading a future pick, I was like, okay, they have to be going for the track star running back. Like, that just feels like a no-brainer to me.
Super smart picks. I even like Chop Robinson. I was a little confused. Like, it seemed like maybe a bit early, but on some level, you can only trade if you have a trade partner. And if you don't find someone you just take your guy. So maybe they didn't get a trade partner they thought was good. But Chop to me was fringy first rounder, but they wanted him great. Fine by me.
We've learned enough not to. I refuse to call people losers based on something we don't know happened, right? But I am curious, like, again, like when you consider risk, when you consider getting good value and things like that, were there any decisions, draft classes, draft picks that felt especially risky to you? And just so you know, I'm not putting you on the spot.
No, you're good.
I'm so fascinated by the Colts picking Laiatu Latu as early as they did, because I'm just like, man, I hope the medicals are clean, because if they're not, that is a really risky top 20 pick. It's just my opinion. I'm curious if there was anything like that for you.
Well, Latu is an interesting one because we obviously, in the media, we're not doctors. We don't get anyone's reports, but he was an extremely polarizing character. That's to say the least. Like, not his personality. Everybody loves him. He's a wonderful kid, but the medicals made him extremely polarizing. I had some GMs I spoke to that were like, do not touch, like, lovely human being, do not touch. And other people, like, clearly, like the Colts were like, we don't care. It's fine. I also think the Titans made some, like, I guess I'm not totally sold on Will Levis, and that might be where I'm confused. Of course, I know they need to build at O-line, but I just thought a lot of their picks were, like, didn't make sense. The cohesive strategy didn't work together. I would love to be proven wrong. I'm not like a Titan hater. It's a beautiful color down there that they wear. Like, it's all good, but I have no, like, I just was kind of like, well, okay, you're picking it really high. So you could have swooped it. I don't know. It's just maybe I need to become a Will Levis believer, but I didn't see enough consistency last year to be all in on that. And to me, supporting him would have meant more. And you know Tony Pollard very well. Like,
True.
I think he's kind of similar. He has similar characteristics to Tajay Spears. So are we getting two of the same? Like, I don't know. It just feels non-cohesive. Like I don't know what I'm.
The way that I square the Titans draft is I think they have done their draft and really their offseason in general. It just feels like the Titans have done everything they can to find out if Will Levis is any good. And if he's not any good, then they'll just be picking in the top 5 next year where they can get a quarterback. That's my thought process. But I am with you that a lot of their picks, I was like, I don't know if this really meshes with where I think you are as an organization right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, like obviously Vrabel there created a different sort of structure. Now we're having a different, a Callahan structure is very different. And you do have to give anyone whose last name is Callahan gets like an O-line free pass. Like, we're going to learn something about the O-line pick that they made. But
right.
like, I just don't, again, to me, it goes back to just really needing your quarterback to be like, when you're there, like, remember, they were ahead of Michael Penix, not to, whatever. And JJ McCarthy hadn't come off yet either. So they did have a chance to take another swing at it. So clearly they believe he's better than those guys, right? Or at least the opportunity to draft someone else. So I'm just a little, I'm always curious by that.
That is because it sounds easy to say like, oh, well, if Will Levis isn't the guy, they can draft one next year. But if one of those guys is a baller, those are the types of decisions that can age very poorly in a front office, which actually, Cynthia, let's end there, because I know we've talked a lot about it, but I can't let you get out of here without talking about some Michael Penix, because I love the analytics aspect of this, because again, like, I can imagine there are plenty of very smart people that are like, just throw resources at the quarterback situation until you figure it out. It doesn't matter if it doesn't really jive. Just find your guy and all will be well. I mean, what do you think about the differing philosophies here?
To me, I think it's a good pick. Now, do I think it's a nice pick? No, like, does it probably hurt some people's feelings, both the one picked and the one that was there? I'm sure. By the way, that'll get sorted out by the time we get to training camp, because both Michael Penix Jr. and Kirk Cousins, they're actually really great people. So I'm sure no one likes to be surprised. None of us. Like, change is scary. So set that aside. Their feelings are valid, like, very valid. However, here's the thing. We had 67 quarterbacks play last season. That's the second most in the common draft era. 67. Reminder, there are only 32 teams. So there's been a lot of quarterback backup play. The NFC South right now is very achievable. This is not the hardest division in football by any stretch of the imagination. Your window for that could be closing, because think about how we feel about the AFC East now versus when the Patriots were dominating. Mm-hmm. The other teams in it, you're like, AFC East, that's easy, right? So let's talk about let's think about like the focus on now. And then Kirk Cousins' deal is really guaranteed for 2 years. Then after that, you can manipulate the way that the contract works. So sure, like, if they're in the fortunate situation that they then have 2 quarterbacks in 2 years or whatever, then they can trade away Michael Penix should they want to remain with Kirk Cousins. They give themselves a bunch of optionality. I think this is all about selecting for the future, but also it's kind of a win-win with the current. Again, we will get the sports psychologist in here and sort it all out. But on some level, like, this is Raheem Morris being like, we're not going to be picking this high ever again. So let's take this guy, throw him on the bench, put it in reserve, and then roll the dice. And by the way, an Achilles is a legit injury. So if something's not going well and we need to make it, like, I think the insurance policy is smart. And again, I'm not taking the human element out of it. I just think it's probably smart for everyone, right? Michael Penix can approximate a really good other quarterback for the scout team too. Your backup quarterback is a very important role. So I think people sometimes underestimate that.
I completely agree with that. I think the two things that I can't square, the two things that I just can't get past is, we just know how valuable a rookie deal is to a quarterback. I mean, you see what the Houston Texans are doing right now. CJ Stroud, being as cheap as he is allowing them to do bold things like sign Danielle Hunter, trade for Stephon Diggs, and on and on and on. It really hurts to know that he's just going to be sitting there not benefiting the Falcons from a financial standpoint.
I kind of view it as this. I think that there's like, to have a good one and to get that insurance policy going forward, I sometimes think there's a value on that you can't, like, you have, like, if you believe, it's all about your strategy. If you believe you're going to build around this type of situation, then you can sign people accordingly. Do I know who's going to rush the passer? No. However, that's their problem, not mine. And I'm not suggesting that this is going to be like the end all be all of situations, but I'm trying to like be like, all right, so what is it that they were thinking and how are they thinking this through? I think it's gutsy to be like, we're not going to be picking this high ever again. We got to take it. We'll deal with the financial consequences later.
You're 100% right that it's gutsy. Like, I'll give Terry Fontenot all the credit in the world for stepping out on that limb and doing the thing that is going to make a lot of people like me aggravated. But I think the other thing I was going to say that I can't get past is it's one thing if the hay is already in the barn and you've already financially committed to this older quarterback. And it's smart in that instance to look for your succession plan. But Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris went ahead with this plan A with Kirk to begin with. It's wild to me to think that the same front office basically fell in love with two different quarterbacks within a month of each other. Like, that's pretty crazy.
It is crazy, but I also think the situation that you draft for your division always. Like, every single team executive will agree. You draft for your division. So like, if I'm in the AFC West, I'm more interested. The Penix thing to me is more interesting as it relates to the Raiders than it is to me as it relates to the Falcons, because to me, you draft for your division. How do I ensure that I win my division? I make sure I have two bomb quarterbacks, not just one, two. Like, we're in good shape then with two, right? Like, you feel very much differently about this team having Kirk Cousins. Most of us were like, okay, yeah. And by the way, if Kirk Cousins were still in Minnesota, I think a lot of people would have been like, oh, wow, it's smart. They're doing like this Jordan Love thing with Aaron Rodgers. It's funny how the perception dictates that, because he made a move and obviously massive money was involved. But I still think we would view it differently if it was in Minnesota.
That is a very good point. Like, a rookie quarterback would be on the Vikings roster even if they had brought back Kirk. And it probably wouldn't aggravate me as much as it does for the Falcons. But here we are. I mean, at some point, I think you just have to say, we'll see how the chips fall in a couple of years. But man,
but look at the Jets last year. They went all in, and that was a tough year. That was a tough season for them. I mean, obviously no one wants to ever get hurt, and no one wants to ever, like, it's just a reality, unfortunately, in the game. I mean, 67 different quarterbacks starting.
You're not wrong. You are not wrong. I personally, maybe speaking of drafting for your division, maybe the Saints way, Spencer Rattler at 150 is a little easier for me to stomach than Michael Penix Jr. at 8. But like I said, like, the fun thing about this is there's going to be 6 twists and turns over the next 3 years that help us figure out who was right. So I guess we'll see. Cynthia, we have to run. I could talk to you all day, but it was so great having you on. I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me. I'll show you my tattoo next time I see you in Hermosa.
I can't wait. Thanks again to Cynthia Frelund for stopping by the show. That does it for us for the week, but we will be back in your feed next week. Plenty more to get to from the draft, as well as whatever comes up in between. I trust the NFL to give us plenty of content to talk about. Make sure you're subscribed, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You'll find the YouTube channel at NFL on Fox, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you get your NFL news, you can find us there. And we will be there next week. As always, I appreciate it so much. Love talking NFL with y'all. I'll talk to y'all soon.